Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Road to Bali from 1952. And this continues my quest to review all of the Road pictures starring Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, and in her last appearance in a Road picture, Dorothy Lamour. And this is the 6th Road movie, and it is the first one in 6 years, or in 5 years, depending on when you believe this was released. I'm going with 1952, although I think most people probably saw it in 53. But whatever. As you will notice, this video was shot in color rather than in black and white. That's because this is the first and only Road movie shot in color. It's actually shot in Technicolor. That kind of goes to how lavish and expensive Road to Bali was. Now, the Road movies were very successful. They were huge blockbusters, and the budgets to them clearly kept getting bigger and bigger. It really started to get out of hand when you got to like Road to Utopia, and then it felt even bigger in Road to Rio. But Road to Bali, it's just gotten incredibly excessive. And Technicolor was very dazzling, and this was a big movie at the time. It was a huge sequel, so of course you're going to shoot it the best way you can, but it almost feels like they've gotten too excessive with it. I mean, the sets were beautiful, the color was really great, and it popped very well, even for, as this is in public domain, it wasn't the greatest DVD, but it looked gorgeous, frankly. If they really restored it, it'd probably look even better. But it feels like the series has just gotten like too big. It's certainly still a fun movie, but it's not as funny of a movie. I didn't laugh as much as I had in the previous 5 Road movies. I thought it was fun. I had a good enough time. Part of me started to think I'm seeing the decline. With Road to Rio, there were enough funny bits. They seemed to get it through, but this one didn't have jokes that were as amazing. It almost felt a lot safer, and that might be because culture really changed from 1947 to 1952. Right when you're getting out of World War II, things didn't immediately become automatically conservative. It took a few years. This is after the Blacklist, several things like that. And so society had become a lot more conservative, and I feel like a lot of the jokes they did in like Road to Rio probably wouldn't fly as much, and they don't even attempt to do jokes like that. There's not jokes in there that I'm just shocked, even in 2016, that they got away with. Not that I watch these movies just for that. It also, the jokes just really aren't that funny in this movie. It's not as funny as it used to be. It's fun, it's silly, but it's not that hilarious fourth wall breaking comedy that an audience hadn't seen before. It felt even safer than the previous movies I thought were safe, becoming more expensive and more lavish, but less kind of relatable, less funny, and less surreal, and frankly a lot less of a good movie than the previous ones, except for maybe Road to Singapore. I think that was probably worse, but the rest of them, Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, or George and Harold, of course Harold is Bob Hope, dorkier name is always Bob Hope, or he gets hot lips, are an American song and dance duo, obviously vaudeville men, performing in Melbourne, Australia, but then they have to leave in a hurry while they're performing on either side of the stage. There is a woman who said both of them proposed to her, and one of them has to marry one of these girls, and of course they leave town as they often do and end up in Darwin, where they end up taking jobs as deep sea divers because all the jobs available on the board were crossed off except deep sea divers. So they went, hey, what the fuck, let's do it. So they decided that they should be deep sea divers, and of course both of them pitch the idea that one guy does the pump and the other guy does the diving. They're going to an idyllic island in Bali, that's in Indonesia, by the way. They end up kind of falling for a Princess Lala, of course played by Dorothy Lamour. They try to win her over as she's being controlled by a prince on the island, and is making them do this dive where many divers have died before to get this treasure, as she loves both of them, mainly Bing Crosby, but has a thing for Bob Hope because he looks like a monkey that she loved from her childhood. And they try to get away from these henchmen with the treasure and hopefully run off with Dorothy Lamour and the treasure and hopefully not get caught. I think one of the most fun things about the Road movies is how surreal and strange and odd they are. That was something that when I didn't really know who Bob Hope was, what kind of attracted me to Road movies, frankly, and him as a comedian, was seeing like how many of these jokes he did that I was like, holy shit, that's like really hilarious. Like even today, that's really going way too far, but he's Bob Hope, so he could get away with it. And it just didn't feel like he was doing that as much, and the comedy was doing that. Now, it doesn't have to do that, but it also didn't feel as funny. They keep doing this joke where like the deep sea diver joke where he said, I'll run the pump, but the other guy, he's really the deep sea diver. And both of them do that joke, and they do that joke several times throughout the movie. And it's not like a great, hilarious joke. The difference really between Road to Rio and Road to Bali is that Road to Rio had enough really great gags that the excessive budget and that it was getting a little more expected didn't bother me. Road to Rio kind of uses the format that Road to Morocco had and Road to Zanzibar and Road to Utopia, in that it does all this unexpected stuff. And when you got to Road to Rio, it was feeling more expected at that point because you're like used to the rhythm of it. This is like toning all that back quite a bit to have all this like crazy musical dance sequences, which of course you come to these movies for, I guess, and like all sorts of nonsense that I was like, I mean, it looks really cool, guys, but like I didn't see this movie for this. I kind of don't understand a lot of what they're doing. Apparently there was a water ballet sequence that they cut. There's even more excessive stuff going on, and I'm not exactly sure why all that was in here. It kind of feels like they have this great format, why not stick to it? They still have certain surreal parts. There's one part in the jungle which kind of reminds me, this is directed by Hal Walker. Only the second director in this series to direct more than one road movie is Hal Walker. He directed Road to Utopia, now he's directing Road to Bali. And much like Road to Utopia, when they take the sleigh dogs and suddenly they have all these things with like where they meet Santa and they see the Paramount logo and all this stuff. In Road to Bali, when they're stuck in the jungle, they have all these various cameo things. They have appearance by Bob Crosby, which is my favorite cameo in the movie, who just comes in, shoots a gun and leaves. And Dorothy Lamour's like, what was that? And Bing Crosby goes, oh, that was my brother. He wanted a shot in the picture. They also have a clip of Humphrey Bogart from The African Queen. A lot of people think he shot it as a parody to The African Queen. Apparently it is actual footage from The African Queen, but since they were both shot in Technicolor, they matched it fairly well. I don't know if they color corrected it or something, or what color correction was in 1952. I have no clue. It didn't feel like I was watching clips from the movie like I was in Muppet Babies or something. It worked very well within the film. There's also an appearance by Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, and apparently because of that, they made a cameo in Martin and Lewis's Scared Stiff as a way to kind of pay them back. Their cameo was in Dorothy Lamour dream sequence, which I thought was cute. They make a reference how they're the younger comedy duo at the time since they were becoming more hip, and Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, obviously. It had been a while since they were doing it, and Jane Russell appears as her character from the film Paleface. I think the cameos actually work to have these like surreal moments in them. Apparently that becomes a staple with the later two having celebrity cameo appearances, but it did actually lead to more like surreal, odd moments. And now this isn't me being kind of a weird intellectual and making these movies sound weirder than they are. They actually do have a lot of crazy ideas in them, but kind of part of the fun of these movies is you never know what's going to happen, and I never felt that way in Road to Bali at all, and it didn't feel as fun because of it. It did feel more safe in their lavish productions and beautiful colors. And I kind of don't like this film in color that much. Color is a lot more unforgiving than black and white, and if you're getting older, I don't think you'd want to keep making these in color. Of course, they didn't do that in the next movie. I just didn't really like even Hal Walker's direction as much. I felt like Road to Utopia was a lot better and was a lot more interesting with that bigger budget. This feels like they're really falling into making more of a safe studio picture. Maybe that's because this film was produced by Bing Crosby Enterprises, Hope Enterprises, and Paramount Pictures. The last three are all paid for by a third by Paramount, a third by Bing Crosby, and a third by Bob Hope. This time they got their, I guess, production companies involved, and Bob Hope actually used that. There's some scene they're shooting on a beach, and he needed to fill up sand traps in his golf course, and of course Bob Hope, and one of the most Bob Hope things you can think of, took the sand from Road to Bali and put it in his golf course, so his golf course has a piece of Road to Bali, because he reasoned that, well, if a third of this movie is mine, a third of that sand is mine, and actually went all the way to the head of Paramount to get that done. Believe it or not, star demands, I guess, but he had a good point. They were actually paying for this movie to get made, and apparently if you worked on this movie, you got paychecks from all three. I'm not sure how that worked. Like, did they pay them a third each? I don't know. This seemed like a much longer shoot than the other Road to movies. Clearly, it had become a big industry. This was a highly anticipated movie, and it was a pretty big hit. Bing Crosby does a lot of good songs in it. This one actually is a song that starts off with Bob Hope, but is a song between the three of them. And Bing's fairly good. Bob Hope is fairly funny in it. One thing I worried about when they took control of it is in Road to Rio, which was the first film that they helped do the 2/3 deal with Paramount. Dorothy Lamour seemed to be minimized quite a bit since she was not helping finance the movie. And in this, her role doesn't seem to be as big, but it wasn't as minimized as it was in Road to Rio. It seems to be not as big as it used to be with the previous ones when they weren't financing them, but it certainly feels a lot more minimized. Frankly, I did like her a lot more in this than Road to Rio. Of course, she wasn't hypnotized in this, thank God. And she has a beautiful bathing sequence in like a pool, and she looks gorgeous. And I really like her in this movie, and you can tell everyone has great chemistry. If anything, I think the chemistry between the co-stars really makes this film flow way better than it ever should, and especially this one. And I really mean it with with this one. I may have said it with other entries, but I really mean it. Like, their chemistry helps this movie work. If you had lesser co-stars, this movie really show how crappy it really is. Dorothy Lamour, this is her last road movie because they didn't bring her back, and her star was falling at this time compared to Road to Singapore when she was the biggest star among the three of them. In this one, her star had diminished at this time considerably, and she wasn't as big as those guys, and of course she didn't help finance it, and she actually wanted some profits or a bigger paycheck. She was just given a salary. She was not given a profit participation like Hope and Crosby were. Now, obviously, they were helping finance the movie, so in all fairness, that makes sense. But on the album soundtrack, the songs that she sings in the movie are actually sung by Peggy Lee. Any story of this is that they didn't ask her, but one version I heard is that she had asked about profit participation, if she could get maybe a cut of it, and she had just asked, and they didn't get back to her about it, and then they just decided to put Peggy Lee on the soundtrack over Dorothy Lamour, which is pretty fucked up. And then they don't put her in the next movie as a co-star, and she just merely has a cameo, which is, I think, pretty stupid considering most of this movie is very much selling the three of them. I think she is probably one of the reasons this franchise worked as well as it did. And in all fairness, they did help pay for it, so certainly they do deserve a bigger share of the money. They should have given her something, kind of rewarded her, because I don't think these films would have been as memorable without her and her keeping up with their chemistry. And it's sad to see her go, and I guess I'll get more angry at sexism in the next one, but it's just frankly a shame because I think she's a really great talent, and I loved watching her in these movies, and it's kind of sad that this is the last one with her in it, at least. I don't recommend this film to anyone who hasn't seen previous road movies. If you're trying to get anyone into the road movies, I would probably say Road to Morocco, of course, but I would probably stop at Road to Rio. I haven't seen the next one, but this doesn't give me a lot of faith for the next one. I think also they kind of were getting a little too old, not to be an ageist or something like that, but like they have all these tons of beauties in this, and they used to just go after Dorothy Lamour and maybe like one other girl, and in this one, or maybe a couple, but like this one, there's like all these scantily clad women in it, and they're like older, and it's like creepier, and they even mention how they wish they were younger so they could get all these ladies and stuff. So it's like they even know at this point. It's getting a little stranger. Just they have so many, and Dorothy Lamour is barely covered up through most of it. I know she's always wearing tight dresses and like revealing outfits and stuff, but it does feel a lot more male gazy than the other road movies really were, unfortunately. It's not that funny anymore. I didn't laugh really that much. I was kind of surprised how little I was laughing throughout this movie, but it really is more straight-laced through most of it. They have kind of weirder elements to it, but I think what makes these movies fun is you never know what's going to happen, and through most of this movie you definitely know what's going to happen. And it's not so much that they've made the unexpected expected, it's that they're just not doing anything really unexpected anymore, and that's just completely expected. You expect film series is this long to kind of end up becoming redundant, and this just makes it feel like they maybe should have stopped in the 40s, like almost like the road movies are synonymous with the 40s. Certain franchises have a certain time period, and when they exceed that time period, it almost doesn't work, and this feels very much that way. It doesn't feel like it's fun. It doesn't feel as alive. It feels like they're trying to make a big movie at this point, and this is 90 minutes, and honestly it felt too long, and it felt dodgy, and there were just a lot of sequences I was like, why is there a huge dance number in this? It used to be about the jokes. It used to be about how funny it was and how I'd be laughing the whole time, and a lot of critics at the time gave this great reviews. I don't know why. I like the weird kind of hokey octopus number, and there's a lot of things I do actually kind of like from it, but this isn't like a great road movie. I'd actually put it towards the bottom of what I've seen, at least thus far. It might actually be worse than Road to Singapore. I know earlier I said it's better than Singapore, but I think it is kind of one of the worst ones just because it didn't really seem to understand what made a road picture work. And although there might be entries that aren't as inspired versions of that, this is a version that doesn't understand how to be a version of that anymore. It might have had a lot of involvement from Frank Butler, who helped write Road to Morocco, I believe the first 3 road movies, and he did a great job on those, but it feels like everybody's just kind of evolved in a way that isn't going to help these movies be as fun and exciting as they once were and what made them such landmark. You're really seeing them out of nostalgia for the earlier ones. It feels like a group getting back together, and you're like, oh, well, this was exciting, but I'd much rather watch the earlier stuff. It certainly was a fun movie and a light, kind of fine little big studio Technicolor thing, but other than that, really, it's fairly forgettable and not really that interesting, and shows a franchise kind of running out of steam and misunderstanding what it really is and not understanding how to get that back because of its excessive, crazy, big budget nature has kind of led it more astray than I've seen it go before, and kind of worried what the future will bring if they've gone this far at this point. So if you have seen Road to Bali and you would like to talk about it, then comment below. in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And check out my road movies review playlist. There will be an annotation below. I have reviewed all of the 5 previous road movies, so if you would like to see them, check that out below. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.